Okay, so hello everyone. Good day, evening, and night. My name is Zhang, a scientific editor at Wonders, a new flagship journal from Cell Prize publishing high impact research and seeks to understand and address today's environmental and sustainability grand challenges. I will be the moderator of this panel, which is about sustainable hydrogen development. As we all know, interest in hydrogen has been growing in the last few years, but differently to many news stars in the past. Momentum this time is turning into real world action. Progress on the ground is reaching a pace that we have not seen before. As shown in International Energy Agency's net zero emission by 2050 roadmap, hydrogen demand should grow sixfold by 2050, and its use should expand to new sectors, including long-distance transport, shipping, aviation, new users in heavy industries, and power generation. Going hand in hand with clean electrification, the development of the hydrogen economy is vital to enable deep decarbonization worldwide in a cost-efficient and effective manner, allowing countries to meet their climate goals and pledges, boost green growth, and create sustainable jobs. However, this important stepping stone requires a significant scaling up of production, infrastructure, end users, and well-structured governance. All should start from today. Where are we now with the hydrogen sector? What are the challenges and remaining gaps in establishing an advanced, reliable, and resilient sustainable hydrogen future? What do we have in store, and what additional progress do we need? This is why we're here today. By bringing together experts from different areas and communities, we hope to provide an opportunity to exchange diverse perspectives and explore optimal options for hydrogen technologies and deployments to deliver substantial potential for a sustainable net zero transition. We're very honored to have an international group of experts join us today. Dr. Falko Ueckerdt, leader of the National Energy Transitions Team at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, Mr. Yong Chen, leader for Sustainable Urban Energy at the International Renewable Energy Agency, Dr. Yanfei Li, research fellow at Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, Professor Chen Li, director of the State Key Lab at Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics, China Academy of Sciences, and Dr. Max Homman, senior researcher and project manager for environmental and energy system studies at Lund University. We will now begin with Falko's keynote talk very soon. Falko leads the National Energy Transitions Team at Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. Currently, he is the project head of the Sino-German Integrate project and works on hydrogen, e-fuels, and the industry sector. Let's welcome Falko. We will soon all mute ourselves and turn off our cameras while Falko is talking. The floor is yours, Falko. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Thank you for inviting me to giving this keynote. I brought a couple of material and I named the talk Low Carbon Hydrogen, so scenarios, challenges, and opportunities. So I brought a couple of scenarios. What I'm saying is mostly from a German and EU perspective, but it's also applicable to other countries, and I'm very much looking forward to getting other perspectives in the discussion afterwards. My talk is divided in three parts, and the first one is that I will sketch the different hydrogen visions that there are. So what role will hydrogen play? Where's consensus on the role of hydrogen? Where's debate on the role of hydrogen? That includes the demand side. So what are the suitable hydrogen applications? And the supply side, what is the role of blue hydrogen, for instance? Then I go into challenges. I quickly talk about market ramp up. I talk about competitiveness and climate effectiveness. And then I also spend a minute or two on implications of Russia's invasion and the energy crisis and what it changes for hydrogen. So I take German scenarios here as an example, and I'm asking the question, what different hydrogen visions are there? Let me introduce you to this plot. This is a plot that goes from 2020 to 2045, which is the point of climate neutrality for Germany that is envisaged for Germany. And what you see on the y-axis is a final energy share, including also feedstocks. And this is in percent. And the picture is not complete yet. What you can see so far is that in final energy, we have about 20% electricity. And we have district heating grids that play a small part. And we have very limited biomass potential that also play a small role here. Those roles are to be increased, but there's a huge gap. All this is fossil fuels, the gray area here, and let me bit by bit fill this. The background, the data of this figure are about 15 scenarios that we calculated for Germany, and we followed a specific aim here. We took up what is being debated. So the fierce debate about hydrogen has different poles, and some say that hydrogen is going to replace today's fossil fuels, like almost entirely. Hydrogen is becoming the new oil, the new gas. And others rather come from a history maybe of electrify everything. So directly electrify everything. So I see the German energy system and also the EU's energy system as at a crossroad at the question of how do we make use of cheap renewable electricity? Do we directly replace or directly use electricity and directly electrify the non-electric end users in transport and industry and buildings? Or do we indirectly electrify them via hydrogen? So the scenarios, they span the scenario space with respect to hydrogen. So what we see in all these 15 scenarios is a significant electrification and a substantial role of green hydrogen and e-fuels. The electrification is mostly for light-duty vehicles and for heating buildings. And the hydrogen that we see in all scenarios is used in industry for primary steel making and for chemical products, for olefins and plastics, and also in long-distance aviation and the maritime sector. And then where the 15 scenarios differ and where also the debate differs very much, is with respect to the residual part of the energy system, and that is mostly heavy-duty transport and process heat, so higher temperature heat for instance, glass melting. And here we as scientists have to acknowledge that there are significant uncertainties. The uncertainties around electrification are mostly how quickly can we diffuse electrifying technologies like the electric car or heat pumps, and how deep can the electrification go? Are there limits, for instance, to high temperature processes? Typically, there are no technical or no fundamental limits, but the question is here costs for transforming the processes and developing new processes, but also infrastructure like grid, especially distribution grid infrastructure when it comes to a deep deployment of heat pumps. You need very strong distribution grids because you have demand spikes in winter then. The uncertainty and the key challenge around hydrogen and e-fuels is that we are at very low, like marginal, always non-existent levels of low carbon hydrogen. So all the hydrogen that is produced today is used in industry. It's typically produced on site, and it's typically gray hydrogen, so made of natural gas without CCS. So especially green hydrogen is a new technology, or electrolysis. I mean, in principle, it's well known, but there are a couple of innovation cycles and learnings to do. The plants that we see today are very small scale, and they're basically handcrafted. So the whole industry has to develop. It has to develop gigafactories, and it has to go into serial production, and the stack size have to increase. So many innovation cycles to come here, and also to reduce costs there. But the question is, how fast can that go, and what can policy do to accelerate this process? And this is like main quantities are main limit then for the role that green hydrogen can play. But as a second key thing are costs and cost competitiveness, then especially when competing to direct electrification. For the light-duty vehicles, most scenarios say that they're dominated by electric cars simply for availability and costs and efficiency reasons. And the same is true for the buildings sectors. It's typically dominated by heat pumps or district heating that can be also run on a large scale heat pump, or maybe there's a role to play for hydrogen there as well. If we zoom, or I will zoom into the building sector in one moment. But what I show here, maybe a last word on the German context. Here we see end-use shares of hydrogen and e-fuels of about 10 to 25, 30%. If you compare this with the net zero 2050 scenario of the IEA, so a scenario that is in line with the Paris target of 1.5 degree, we see that the IEA is rather at the lower end. It's having, in 2050, it's having 10% of the end uses being met by hydrogen and derived fuels. However, I think that feedstocks are not in here. So this might increase once you consider the demand for primary steel and the chemical sector. Now I zoom into the building sector just for a moment. Here, the scenarios divert a bit from the debate. The debate is in those countries that have distribution grids, in those countries that heavily rely on gas and have many gas industry incumbents. The debate typically also sketches the vision of that hydrogen will be like substantially used and replace natural gas in distribution grids. The argument is then we have all this grid infrastructure. That's an asset, we should make use of it. In Germany, that's 500,000 kilometers of this distribution grid. And then the scenarios, on the other hand, still say that these assets reduce in value in the future, and that we do not need all of it. So in all scenarios, the major chunk of heat is electrified or supplied via district heating grids. So the role of hydrogen in decentral heating varies very much from almost zero to about maybe 20, 30%. One thing that is connected to the hydrogen end-use debate. So on general, the hydrogen application and end-use debate then is very much connected with the general role of hydrogen. How much hydrogen do we need? And then this debate is also connected to how much will countries import, how much energy will they import, and how much will they domestically produce. That's specifically the case. So for those countries that are rather densely populated, like EU countries, specifically Germany, but also countries like Japan. And And here are, again, the selection of scenarios. Some range from more direct electrification to more hydrogen and e-fuels. And what you see here is these bars. I hope you see my cursor. I can also improve that actually. These bars show how much renewables are, like renewable electricity is produced domestically. And you see the more direct electrification you have, the more electricity you need to produce domestically. And these bars show how much electricity is imported, but this electricity is imported as hydrogen or e-fuels. So it's the renewable electricity expansion that is behind these imports. And you see a couple of things. You see that domestic renewable expansion is needed in all scenarios. You actually only see this once you compare our today's power demand is this, and this is where we have to get in terms of renewable electricity, even in a scenario that imports very much. And you see also that in a scenario with much direct electrification, we have to import, these are 2045 figures, we have to import energy that is equivalent to today's electricity system in the future. But yeah, you see that there's a trade-off. You can actually like protect domestic resources and land, or if you run into social acceptance barriers, you can bypass them by importing more renewable fuels, e-fuels, and hydrogen. And the scenarios vary in terms of whether the imports are rather e-fuels or whether they are rather hydrogen. Yeah, one point that is not represented here is hydrogen will definitely play a role within the power sector to balance demand and supply, especially if there's a strong seasonal mismatch between a renewable supply that might rely very much on solar and electricity demand that might be highest in winter. And then a second dimension of the debate. So far, Germany has the aim, like the long-term aim of relying only on green hydrogen. But then there's the debate around whether blue hydrogen, that is indicated here, can play a bridging role at least. And the background is the scaling of electrolysis is limited, and maybe we need to like substantially move towards hydrogen end users. We need substantial hydrogen already within this decade, and blue hydrogen might fill a gap here. Even though I see investments in blue hydrogen also as something challenging, especially, and these challenges increased with the energy crisis and the very high natural gas prices now. But then there are also scenarios, and in general, once you invest in blue hydrogen, probably you will have a small part of blue hydrogen also in the longer term. And in general, there is a debate on what blue hydrogen, what role it should play. Should it be no role or a bridging role or a continuous role? The IEA sees this. So the blue parts actually are green hydrogen here, which is a bit counterintuitive. And the yellow parts are blue hydrogen. So they see 50-50 maybe in 2030, that these are global figures, and then a substantial share also in the long term. But this was before the crisis, so I think the competitiveness of green versus blue hydrogen shifts here a bit, which means that we have to even more focus and foster green hydrogen. So some challenges. I mentioned it already. The market ramp up is a huge challenge. But actually, if you see this figure, it looks very promising. This is capacity, electrolysis capacity announced for the EU. And you see that France and Germany, they're the heavy players. Actually, I think the colors are wrong. I think this is Germany. And you see that the announcements, the project announcements, are like exponentially increasing. However, if you look into the project status, this is IEA data from half a year ago, so it's probably not up to date anymore, but still representing something. And that is, like in this data from half a year ago, about 80% of the newly announced projects, that's the blue bar here, is not backed with the final investment decision yet. So there's huge uncertainty on whether the electrolysis capacity and the hydrogen projects are coming at least with this speed. Note that this bar is for 2023, so next year. And then what we did is we assumed a success rate for 2023 of 30% of these projects that are only announced, and then we ask ourselves what growth rate is needed to meet the 40 gigawatt target. And the 40 gigawatt target is the current EU target in 2030. And the growth rate is about 70%. And that is as high as the best years that we have seen for solar PV, so the growth rate champion so far in the EU. And it's about twice as fast as wind power was growing in its best decades. So you can see that there's quite a challenge. So PV was really the growth rate champion. PV was a plug and play system. So once you had feed-in tariffs, the technology learned, the deployment took off, and you only needed to connect the PV plants into an existing electricity system. The hydrogen challenge is by far bigger because you're trying something unprecedented here by pure like societal or industry or policy will. You're trying to ramp up an infrastructure and demand and supply at the same time. So we don't have hydrogen demand in energy terms today. So we try to build that up because hydrogen is a vector for low carbon energy. And at the same time, obviously, it's a huge coordination challenge to deciding where the infrastructure should be, depending on where the main supply projects come from and where the first anchor points of substantial hydrogen demands are. And usually these transformations in history, they were driven by technology advancements, but this the emergence of the car and connected with the new energy carrier of oil, or the emergence of electricity connected with the electric light bulb, or the emergence of coal connected with the industrial revolution, the steam engine. So these were synergetic evolvements that took much longer, and now here we're trying to enforce something due to climate change mainly. If we succeed in this growth rate and we meet the 40 gigawatt target, then we can meet about 1% of the final energy in EU in 2030. So, and this number actually needs to be much higher if you want to reach 1.5 degree. This is a global picture. I shared the presentation afterwards, and you can see how it looked globally. Or maybe a short thing. So the EU announcements are still dominating the global announcements. So EU seems to be a lead market here. And within EU, there's one huge project in Spain that is being announced in 2030. That is dominating the 2030 numbers. Also, the IEA sees a huge gap between projects between pledges, governmental pledges and ambitions, and then between what is needed for achieving the Paris targets. So this is a huge gap. So, and competitiveness is a key challenge, but I also have to say, apart from competitiveness, there are a few other factors, and one factor is regulatory uncertainty that we have specifically in the EU. We are waiting, or the industry is waiting for a delegated act that defines what green hydrogen is and what can then apply for subsidy programs in the EU. But we can discuss this later. So quickly on competitiveness, these are hydrogen costs from IRENA in this case, two main drivers, electrolysis costs that are varied between 1,000 and 650 here today, and that substantially will decrease because electrolysis is a very modular and in principle simple technology that can quickly go through innovation cycles and be produced in serial production. And the second factor is electricity costs. So $65 up here and electricity costs of $20 per megawatt only down here. And then, which is very ambitious. So typically hydrogen costs are around this area here today, and they come down, but we don't know how quick they come down and how deep they come down. The fossil fuel range indicated here shows that if we start here, there is a huge gap still to fossil fuels. That gap decreases, however. And the future competitiveness will more and more, at least for the EU, but also for other regions, depend on the emission savings and on the increase of the carbon price. So there's no surprise that this new technology is more costly in terms of direct costs. But once you include also carbon costs onto fossil fuels, this gap even faster declines. I illustrate that for e-fuels here. These are direct costs in 2020, 2030, and 2050 for liquid e-fuels. And in terms of direct costs, these are wholesale gasoline prices in the last decade. And you see again a huge gap comparing these bars from today to the gasoline prices. But you can then calculate the fuel switching CO2 price. So the CO2 price necessary to equal the cost of gasoline and e-gasoline. And these prices are very high today. They're about 800, but they come down to 300 maybe within a decade. And maybe eventually e-fuels can be as cheap as fossil fuels are today. But this very much relies on substantial innovation also for, in this case, direct air capture to have sustainable CO2 to produce an e-fuel. And you can show this gap and how it evolves. So these are, again, CO2 prices required, they decrease, and at the same time, carbon prices increase. These are global scenarios. For the EU, carbon prices might increase even to 200 in 2030. And you can see that this gap is diminishing. However, there will remain a gap for at least 1 decade. And this is true for many hydrogen applications. So, and this is a competitiveness gap CO2 prices need to increase. However, they will not close this gap quick enough to spur the investments that we need today. So we need dedicated technology support already today. And there are a couple of proposals on the table. One is carbon contracts for differences for the industry, and another one is creating secure demand for e-fuels by introducing quotas for e-kerosene, for instance. Yeah, jump over this. So, and yeah, a few words on climate effectiveness. How many more minutes do I have actually? If you could tell me, that would be helpful.
You have your time, Falko, so please take on.
Okay, thank you. So on climate effectiveness, it's important to note that hydrogen, of course, is no energy source, but an energy carrier. So the emissions connected with it very much depend on the energy input or the carbon footprint of the energy input. If we're talking about green hydrogen, this is mainly the carbon input of electricity that the hydrogen is produced from. And this is what is shown here on the x-axis. So this is 200 gram per kilowatt hours. This is where the EU mix is right now. Natural gas would be around 370. So electricity from natural gas. This is the electricity that the carbon footprint of hard coal electricity. And if you produce then hydrogen from it, you end up here. These are the numbers of carbon footprint, and this is basically the electricity footprint divided by the efficiency of an hydrogen electrolysis. But what you can see here, if you're taking the German mix or the EU mix, then your hydrogen is more carbon intensive than the direct use of natural gas. So you really have to go down to almost complete carbon-free electricity input. Just connecting an electrolysis to the grid is not sufficient. The input should be at least 80% of renewable electricity to produce a benefit in terms of carbon. And that is specifically, I mean, you don't need to be worried in electricity systems that have high shares of renewables already and that are entirely running on renewables already. And especially since the electricity sector is the sector that transformed the most and as the first sector. But still, you have to have an eye on this, and this might mean that the electricity sector has to transform even faster. And I show you the same picture for heavy-duty transport. Here it's also carbon intensity of the electricity mix, but the x-axis is inverted. But I'm showing you this to compare the hydrogen truck, this is this line, to the electric truck. So the slope here is anti-proportional to efficiencies, and the hydrogen truck is 2 to 3 times less efficient than the electric truck. And that's why the electric truck can create a benefit in terms of carbon already at around 60% share of renewable electricity, whereas the hydrogen truck needs about 80% to 90%. But in the end, we need 100% renewables or like really low carbon electricity to make these electrifying options a valid climate option. And in addition, there's a fierce debate in the EU that is also connected to the delegated act that everybody is waiting for, because they're especially environmental NGOs are asking for renewable electricity to being really additional. So renewable electricity that goes into electrolysis should be additional, and they are asking for conditions and criteria here. And the industry says no, that is making the investments even more risky and more difficult. Please let us just focus on building electrolysis without strict criteria. So, yes. To finish the competitiveness section, I made this figure. This figure shows, again, this CO2 price is required, or you can also, this relates to, or this the same as marginal abatement costs. And this is shown here for e-fuels and also for direct electrification. And on the x-axis, you see potential hydrogen end users. And these end users, these are the different end users here, and they're sorted according to the cost of directly electrifying them. And the green section here shows segments or sectors that can be directly electrified at comparably low costs. And then in this sector, it gets more costly. And then these sectors cannot be electrified anymore. Here you rely on hydrogen. And this ordering suggests a merit order for applying e-fuels and hydrogen. So they are indispensable for these segments, and these segments are huge. And at the same time, they're connected with long lead times and they are very capital intensive, like steel making, or like diverting to direct reduction with hydrogen from a blast furnace, for instance. These are huge investments, and that's why I suggest, and many other analysts also suggested, to prioritize these sectors for as the first hydrogen applications, and do not consider hydrogen so much in this segment. And then we have this segment, which is basically the segment that I showed you before, where also the scenarios diverge. So for instance, heavy duty transport is here, or high temperature industrial processes. So, and my last slide now, some implications of the ongoing energy crisis, very much from the EU perspective.
Excuse me, Falko.
Yes.
Sorry for interrupt you, but I guess we're running a little bit out of the time. So may I take a pause here and we introduce all the panelists, and maybe we can leave some discussion questions later.
Yes, we can do this. This was the last slide anyway.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn myself on, and of course, please turn your camera on. Thank you so much, Falko, for your amazing keynote talk. I'm really sorry I have to cut you off because of the time. And the reason that we could enjoy most of Falko's keynote talk is because, unfortunately, we don't have one panelist with us today. Hopefully, everything goes fine with him, but we're just trying to reach out to him, but haven't heard back from him yet. So we will continue with the panel discussion. We will, perhaps if we have time, we will touch upon what Falko left over. So now, with this amazing keynote talk, I will first continue by introducing our panelists, and then we will jump into our panel discussion. So perhaps we will start from Dr. Yanfei Li from Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Welcome, Yanfei. You will have approximately 2 minutes to introduce yourself and let us know your interest or research interest, or your big projects that in the context of today's discussion to this panel. The floor is yours.
Sure. Shanshan, thanks very much for introducing me, and also thanks to all the organizers for inviting me here. It's been a great honor and pleasure. So I'm a research fellow with this Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and the East Asia, for those who are not familiar with this combination. ASEAN stands for the Union of Southeast Asian Countries. So as the name suggests, this institute is an international think tank is also an intergovernmental organization. We have this energy unit, and I used to be one of the energy economists, and now the title is changed to research fellow. However, still working on the energy policies and energy markets in this region. And recently, in recent years, my research focus shifted more to the renewable energy and also hydrogen. So by training, I'm an economist, and since we also serve the policy maker community in this region, so I hope that later I can contribute more perspectives from the economics and also policy point of view. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Yanfei. Perfect time. Next, maybe we can welcome Professor Chen Li from Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics at China Academy of Sciences.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you here in the online conference. I'm Chen Li, but in Chinese it's Chen Li, but in English, most people call me Chen Li, so Chen Li is okay. I'm working in the institute called Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics, actually the Physical Chemistry Institute, belong to the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And my research has been in renewable energy for over decades. So I particularly I'm interested in the solar fuels, include solar hydrogen, solar methanol, for example. And I have a team working on the solar hydrogen, the solar methanol. Recently, we actually have demonstrated the big process of e-methanol. You call it e-methanol. It's also solar methanol. And from CO2 hydrogenation to e-methanol, of course, hydrogen is from electrolysis through PV, solar energy. And so it's becoming emerging technology in China, at least. And so more and more industry now are involved in this process. And so this is, I think, the thing we like to share with you. In this meeting, we can discuss more detail about the technology. And also, I'm very much interested in the hydrogen production and storage and transportation. That is, I think, the crucial issues nowadays to develop hydrogen technology. And anyway, I'm very much looks forward to your opinion on hydrogen technology in China or in Germany or in the world as well. So it's a very, very interesting topic. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ken. That's amazing. And next, maybe we hand the microphone to Professor Max Homman from Yong University. The floor is yours, Max.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this excellent seminar. My name is Max Homman. I'm an associate professor at Environmental and Energy System Analysis at Lund University. I'm also head of division here. My background is in engineering, and I've spent the last 10 years roughly working on heavy industry and climate policy. We do energy system analysis and technology assessments, but a lot of our late work has been on actually policy analysis for understanding the framework conditions that could make these technologies first to develop and then also to actually become competitive on the market. For the past 5 years, I've been working heavily involved in what is Sweden known as the Hybrid project, which is claiming to be the first fossil-free steel value chain developing with hydrogen direct reduction. Is actually a project that is ongoing, is actually moving very quickly now. But I also have a good, deep interest in the petrochemical sectors. These are two very hard to abate sectors. We do also have competence in heavy-duty transport, not me personally directly, but I do know roughly what is going on in that sector as well. So with that, I think that covers roughly my background, and I would enjoy to be part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Max, and welcome you all on board, and thank you for your onboarding message. And so I think now we are ready to launch our panel discussion. I will raise a few questions to you all in the next hour or so, and if necessary, please do feel free to use the raise my hand button or just raise your hand indeed, so we can freely join the discussion. And my colleague, Dr. Philip from CAM, is very kindly helping us to collect information or questions from the live Q&A if we have any, and if we have time. I will feature those later on. So to start with, because I think there are a lot to talk from Falko's keynote talk, which is really interesting. And by hearing your background, I feel like this is an excellent time to discuss this already very versatile hydrogen products, if I can call it that, and from different opinions. So maybe we can start from a very general question just to warm up and to provide our audience some rather background stage information. In your opinion, maybe you have different opinion perspectives. What or where could be the hotspots given the current infrastructure, given the current regulation projects or ongoing investment? Where could be a hotspots for hydrogen development or deployment in the next, let's say, 10 years towards net zero? And maybe we can then start for more, begin with more specific question from there. Maybe Falko, you would like to comment on something? I know EU is a big hotspot, given your keynote talk.
I give a quick answer, and that should pave the way for Max then to add detail there. Yeah, as I mentioned, so sectorally, hotspots would be the industry sector. They need to reinvest in the next years. We see that. So in Germany, primary steel is one key no-regret focus sector. The government is right now introducing carbon contracts for differences for several industrial applications, but steel is really the segment where the industry is most prepared to have substantial demands already in 2030. So this is sectorally. Then the EU is definitely, because of its speed, a hotspot in terms of general demand. Where does the hydrogen come from? To a large extent from the EU. Every country has electrolysis targets, but in the EU, we need a huge infrastructure. I would be happy seeing the Spanish project going forward, where we really have like 60 gigawatts of electrolysis in southern Spain, producing hydrogen that is then transported via pipeline to the other European countries, including Germany, for instance. And the last word, ammonia is, like today, being built on gray hydrogen. It's also a no regret sector that requires green hydrogen. But for ammonia, it's a bit different, because that is a nice entry point for global or like more than regional transport via ships. So here I see the opportunity for other countries to producing ammonia and exporting them to those that are willing to pay for green ammonia. And here the willingness to pay for it, I see also highest in the EU. Sorry, it was longer than I expected, Max.
That's amazing. Thanks, Falko. Anyone else would like to share your insights?
Yes, I can say a few words. I agree with Falko. Just lower my hand. I agree with Falko a lot. I think we have to sort of first look at where are the sectors that will create the demand, And then another thing that we need, and that is steel, as I said, that's growing quite quickly now. I also note that shipping and ammonia is also a very strong sector that's growing. Eventually, I will hope petrochemicals would grow. We haven't seen that yet, but it's starting to come up. But the challenges from a cost competitive aspect is greater for the chemical sector than it is for steel and for shipping. So we see that's the sectors where we will have the first kind of, where there's really actually hydrogen is perhaps the primary solution. Then you have to look at access to renewable electricity, that you actually could promote this kind of huge green hydrogen available, or access to fossil fuels, predominantly gas, and a willingness to go to CCS, where you could also be hotspots. So there, geographically, of course, Europe has strong policies making the green hydrogen and access to electricity a possibility, even though it differs between different European countries. I would say Scandinavia is quite well off. I know Germany has a huge ambition, but also had land issue problems that we don't have in the same ways. I would argue there's a lot of going on, should be a lot going on in the MENA region, Middle East. We do have Australia, which is basically in this context a sleeping giant. So there is a lot of hotspots that could potentially go. And then also, of course, we have countries that do have gas that could actually transform. I haven't really seen any willingness to adopt CCS there, but I'm talking about, it's Russia, Iran, Qatar that has gas that would have the potential to produce huge amount of blue hydrogen. But whether that would be possible to 2030, I'm not sure. So I would argue that look at the sectors and then look at where do they have the access and the possibilities to make this huge available. And there would be, well, of course, Europe, Australia, Middle East. I hope also China. I understand there's a lot going on there right now, but I'm not fully up to date. Might someone inform me here?
Thanks a lot, Max. Yeah, I really appreciate your feedback, and it's even make this picture even more comprehensive. So really appreciate that. And maybe Ken or Yanfei, you would like to comment something about development on this?
Okay, so I have a few questions, comments, and to Falko, and you were discussing about the situation in Germany, and of course Germany is a very typical situation. Is that common for other European countries? And recently I noticed EU had announced EU will enhance the hydrogen energy because of the natural gas is not reliable. So I'm wondering how much hydrogen potentially can be produced from like West Germany, like Germany and West Europe. So, and of course, one of the way you can still use the coal to produce the blue hydrogen by using the CCS. So the question is how much cost and the situation in Germany. Is that possible to produce a huge amount of hydrogen through the like coal or natural gas resources? And so that is also a debate issue in China. Some people produce the hydrogen, so-called blue hydrogen, by using CCS. But the CCS is another problem, and so we are not sure if CCS is able to be huge amount of hydrogen production. This is the one thing. Other thing is you are talking about the hydrogen storage and transportation. there are many, not many, but a number of ways to store the hydrogen and for the reliable, safe transportation by recently using chemical compounds like toluene, and also ammonia and methanol. So I would like to ask you to compare the ammonia and the methanol, e-methanol, which is more promising in the future for hydrogen storage and transportation. So this is one thing now also in China people are discussing. And for the government side, I think China now is put big effort in hydrogen technology and industry. Very recently, the Ministry of Energy and also announced a big project, and so for the future play from now to 2035 is a long-term play to develop hydrogen as a major energy source. And so what's the situation in Europe and in EU and Germany? Okay, that's my question. There are also some issues I discussed here. Falko, could you comment on?
Yeah, I'm happy. But if you promise me in return that you explain the Chinese ambitions a bit to us, then. Yeah, to your first question. So where does hydrogen come from in the EU? So first, you're right. The 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, in response to the crisis, the EU Commission put in a policy ambition document that they want to increase the ambition from the 40 gigawatts that I showed to about 100 gigawatts. So really 2.5-fold increase of the already very ambitious 40 gigawatt target, which is obvious then at the same time, because the 40 gigawatt target only brings us to about 1% of final energy demand. So where would this green hydrogen be produced? And then I comment on blue. So not in Germany so much. We have some targets for Germany, but it's really what the electrolysis that is. So we have electrolysis targets that are ambitious in the short term, but in the long term, we will import most of what we use as hydrogen or derived fuels. So really, land is an issue in Germany. We are hitting limits, or will be hitting limits there already for what we need in terms of direct electrification and replacing the remaining coal and natural gas there. But for the EU as a whole, it looks different. So here we have sufficient potential to meet our hydrogen demands already only within the EU. And there are a couple of studies that also predict that there are cost advantages in producing hydrogen in the EU compared to importing it, mainly due to transport costs. So the main advantage is pipelines are the cheapest once they are built or repurposed. So this is the cheapest form of transporting hydrogen, not the cheapest form of transporting ammonia or olefins or methanol, of course. So so I see that Europe is going towards a hydrogen pipeline backbone and will integrate the different hotspots of renewable electricity. In terms of blue hydrogen, for the EU, I mean, it's always a debate. The UK, which is not part of the EU, but still is moving towards blue hydrogen. 2 huge industrial plants are planned there to start operation in 2026 and 2027. Norway is a huge player that is having pilot projects and wants to export blue hydrogen to the EU. In general, the case really the competitiveness case really reduced with the crisis. So natural gas is now a scarce resource. And from a system perspective, it's more valuable to import natural gas from Norway than to losing about 25% to having then blue hydrogen. And also the competitiveness in terms of prices is worse. So there was an uncertain investment window for blue hydrogen that I see narrowing very much now. But still, blue hydrogen might be a case to be, or blue ammonia, especially to be imported from the Middle East, for instance. In general, in terms of blue hydrogen, it's important. Like SMR technology typically, so there are two types of technologies. SMR is established and combining SMR with CCS is possible, but there are several spots where you can capture the CO2, and typically, or the easiest way would only lead to a reduction or a capture rate of about 50 to 60%. And that's then not enough to be competitive with carbon pricing. So you probably have to move to ATR technology, autothermal reforming, where you have higher capture rates at lower prices. But this is a rather new technology. So the plants planned in UK are ATR plants, but the large scale plants are only coming in the second half of this decade. So we have to see how the technology develops, but it's very important to account here for the full life cycle emissions. And also the EU, when it imports hydrogen and derived products, it will make sure that these are really low carbon products. Also, I have to mention the methane leakage connected in with the natural gas supply before even making hydrogen, blue hydrogen here. Then on transport, I really see, pipelines for hydrogen, but yeah, as far as you can get, so typically 2,000 or maybe 3,000 kilometers, maybe to Morocco, for instance, maybe including the MENA, probably not Middle East, because that is politically more difficult. So here then you need shipping, and you're asking for ammonia and e-methanol. Well, the biggest, so first of all, if you need ammonia, then import ammonia, that's fine, and you wouldn't need to crack it then. So this will be the entry points. If you need methanol, then you would import e-methanol, and you wouldn't reform it then back to hydrogen. As a hydrogen carrier, I'm not sure if we see huge shipping of products that are then cracked into hydrogen. But ammonia is maybe, compared to liquid hydrogen, is the best option. However, ammonia cracking is also in its early stages. I mean, we know the process, it's possible, but it's a high temperature process. You need energy. You lose about 25% of the energy. Large scale ammonia crackers have to be developed still. So it's very uncertain if we see hydrogen transport. And the last point, for e-methanol and all hydrocarbons, you need a sustainable CO2 source, typically direct air capture. And this is in its infancies, needs to be developed anyways, but is another bottleneck that you don't have with ammonia, as there's no carbon in there.
Okay, so thank you. So for the hydrogen storage, and we simply estimate ammonia is about 17% in weight, and methanol could be 18.25%, a little bit higher than ammonia if you do the reforming. And so the infrastructure for the two compounds seems methanol is more favorable, because you have already exist the infrastructure for the ammonia transportation. for the methanol transportation. However, ammonia is, as you mentioned, it's not yet well developed for the energy material, just for chemicals at the moment. Yeah. So this is depends. So we are not sure which one is more, for the future, more reliable and promising for the hydrogen carry. And so as seems methanol is a one at the moment is ideal molecule which can be used for hydrogen carry, and also which can be used as a fuel directly. Also, methanol can be used for chemical industry, and that is is an intermediate molecule for many chemical processes. So, okay, I think if we may have more idea to give a comment.
Yeah, I don't see methanol as a carrier for hydrogen. I see, as you said, it's so valuable having. Once you have methanol, you probably use it as a pre-product for producing olefins, or as a pre-product for producing other fuels.
Okay.
Reforming methanol into hydrogen, I don't see viable. Like back to hydrogen and then using hydrogen.
Maybe I can help to make up for the missing picture, which is about East Asia, and Falko just asked for, and I think Max is also looking into it. And I actually have prepared for this with a few slides, so maybe I can share my screen here. We did a expert survey in China last year, and I think Prof. Lee also participated in it, if you remember. So as we know, China is the biggest, I think, future market for hydrogen energy and fuel cell in this region, and also I think in the world. If you look at the picture for BEVs now around the world, China is indeed the leading country. So I think if similar level of policy support could be given by Chinese government in China, it is totally possible that the country will lead again to some extent, jointly with European and other countries in promoting the use of hydrogen and its derivative energy forms. So we did this survey to ask around what's your opinion, for example, about the share of hydrogen in the future energy consumption. I think most of them rationally agreed around this level, that is 10 to 15%. This is also consistent with the model forecast from several main energy research institutes in China. And regarding how soon this will be happening, most of the experts from industry, from academia, and the government actually predicted that in about 5 to 10 years, this will be happening in China. So quite optimistic, I think. And regarding how this would happen, there is also a kind of a simple form of roadmap that we develop here. Firstly, I think most of the players or experts in China are eyeing on fuel cell applications for commercial vehicles. This is actually also the emphasis from government in China now. And then in several municipality service fleets, we also see that this may happen first in China. And then this is followed by applications in the power sector and others. So in a longer term, like a medium term or long term. And regarding the infrastructure, the type of infrastructure to be developed, there is also a converging agreement that initially maybe we rely on the so-called gray hydrogen, and then gradually move on to blue hydrogen, fossil fuel to hydrogen with CCS. In the medium term, we will gradually develop the green hydrogen, which is renewable to hydrogen. And also the infrastructure for transport will also only be developed in the medium term, in 5 to 10 years, not right now. Right now, maybe rely more on the compressed hydrogen transportation. I think ammonia and methanol are also of interest now, but to move the bulk of hydrogen, maybe we still rely on the compressed hydrogen. And this thinking, I think, is slightly different from our neighbors like Japan and Korea. Japan, I heard from its government officer and also academia researcher that now they're eyeing more on ammonia to be developed first. After the scale is established for utilizing this kind of new energy, they will gradually move on to hydrogen in its original form, including blue hydrogen and green hydrogen. So this is a sort of a situation in China. And we also last year helped the ASEAN Center for Energy to develop its own hydrogen sort of roadmap report. And this report was eventually adopted by the ASEAN Energy Ministers meeting last year. So I think this could be, this message could be perceived as semi-official kind of a vision for ASEAN. So they're actually eyeing on in the future to export hydrogen and its derivatives to Japan, Korea, and China first. With that, it would help bring up a new industry with the industrial capacity so that later they can develop their own hydrogen economy and hydrogen society domestically. That's the ASEAN. This one shows the three-phase kind of roadmap for ASEAN's hydrogen energy. So bringing all this together, we are now coming to an even bigger idea that with this global momentum of developing hydrogen and its derivative energy, maybe hydrogen and its derivatives become a new strategic energy commodity in the coming future. And as this Ukraine crisis is happening and the COVID-19 pandemic, both I think are actually helping to accelerate the need of developing renewable energy together with hydrogen. So we are seeing that maybe several main energy corridors in the form of hydrogen and its derivatives may be formed to partially and gradually replace oil and gas trade globally. So this new low carbon energy commodity, we have envisioned the several trading routes, but the research is still ongoing in order to validate the feasibilities. So this is this map just shows this concept. So if you are interested, you are more than welcome to contact me. So maybe we can collaborate in this. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yanfei. I think that's very interesting. And it, yeah, exactly give us a bigger picture of how hydrogen development, let's say, for different colors of hydrogens around the globe, by your notes and by Falko and Max and Ken's notes. So I think now we have, well, I didn't imagine that we will discuss this many, but this is quite good because now we have touched upon quite a few different sectors, and maybe we could roll back a few steps. And I'm just wondering, because we know that for instance, nowadays, there are quite a few scenarios and investments and projects that are heavily focused on blue hydrogen. It has benefits, it has potentials because of, for instance, existing infrastructure and a lot of different configurations that are ready at hand. But at the same time, like Falko mentioned in his keynote talk, if we consider the whole entire climate effectiveness, there might be some potential trade-offs like carbon lockings and all those type of stuffs. And also we need to consider if CCS is that much ready to be ready paired with how we produce hydrogens from natural gas. So my question is like the extent to which, if we focus on the current, if we make a huge amount of investment in blue hydrogen, the extent to which that enables us to make baby steps towards net zero, that's definitely important. But if we look at a bigger picture, how we need to balance, how we need to make the trade-offs, and what policies, what additional measures do we need to guarantee us that we are not locked into another problem by moving towards some seemingly green solution?
I don't know if I can add something to this, but a little bit. But yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. Investing heavily into blue hydrogen will create a carbon locking because you will invest in facilities, you will invest in technologies, and most of all, you will also invest in humans and capacity. But that doesn't say we shouldn't invest in blue hydrogen. It's just a question about the scale. And there need to be a transition plan to move towards green hydrogen, because I'm quite convinced, at least in major parts of the world, green hydrogen will quite soon become cheaper than blue hydrogen. So it will be a competitiveness issue. But there is, of course, countries where you do have landlocked natural gas that basically then has a very low cost. And there might be options there actually to even long-term use the natural gas. But then we also need a development that we actually get it to an emission-intensive level that is acceptable under the Paris Agreement. And those requirements are quite tough. So that is sort of that main point. Another point I think we should also think of, we're talking about different sectors as they were separated a little bit here. One idea with the hydrogen development is actually to combine sectors to create an integrated energy system. I think the talk about ammonia, methanol, or hydrogen highlights that thing. I agree with Falko that ammonia will mostly be used for ammonia, but there will be parts of it that will be used to go back to hydrogen in order to secure the hydrogen supply in certain regions, certain times, the same for methanol. So I think sector coupling is also something we need to keep in mind here, but it's perhaps a little bit in a 10-year frame time or longer. Thank you.
Thanks, Max. That's really interesting. Anyone else would like to comment on this from maybe policy, some aspects?
Yeah, I can try. So avoiding going into bridge technologies that are not actually clean enough. Certification is definitely important, and the EU is very much looking at certification, which includes then monitoring of life cycle emissions and third-party validation. So the EU is developing criteria on renewable fuels coming from electricity, but as well for blue hydrogen and blue ammonia. And those I see are going to be linked, or have to be linked, it's not happening yet, to the CBAM, so the carbon border tax adjustments that the EU is planning to develop. So that means that at the borders of the EU, the incoming products and potentially also hydrogen and ammonia are then carbon priced according to their life cycle emissions that have to be certified before.
That's a really good point. Ken or Yanfei, would you like to?
Yeah, I just want to know your opinion about the green hydrogen in metallurgy in steel field. And mostly people now are concerned more about the transportation, like hydrogen fuel cell cars. But I think more applications in industrial, like metallurgy, steel field. What about the situation in Europe? I heard from the news and some technology using green hydrogen for metallurgy field have been going to be transported to China. So is that true? I don't know, Germany and Sweden, and so you have this technology. Is already well developed or just in the demonstration phase?
I guess this is my question to take.
Yeah, please.
Yes, the steel sector is moving quite quickly in Europe, and roughly the technology is not rocket science. It is fairly well proven. There is a pilot program going on in Luleå, north of Sweden, with the hybrid project, and there are several pilot projects also in Germany, I know, and in Austria, that are developing hydrogen direct reduction. There are also other hydrogen application, hydrogen plasma reduction, etc., and also introducing hydrogen directly into the blast furnaces. I would argue that hydrogen direct reduction is the one closest to market, since it's actually doesn't need any very much new technologies. It's just combining technologies that we already have, and it actually has the potential to make the whole steel value chain completely fossil-free, which is the long-term target. There is a demonstration plant being built in north of Sweden that will be finished by 2025 and start selling fossil-free steel in 2026. They've actually already signed contracts with some customers there. There is also a competitor that called H2 Green Steel and so on. So there's a lot of movement here, and I think the main reason is that technology is very much ready, and the competitiveness of hydrogen direct reduction steel versus blast furnace traditional primary steel is actually not a very big issue right now. One, with the current low electricity prices that we can see in northern Scandinavia, where we have good access, and also with the high EU carbon prices within the EU ETS, makes green hydrogen sort of common sense in that sense. And that's one of the reasons why we see this very strong development. But I know that Chinese HBIS and Baowu Steel are also looking into hydrogen more on a research and pilot phase right now. But I think it will come there as well.
Yeah, good. So it's pretty much depends on the cost of hydrogen, right? So that's I think China now, the carbon tax is still is very low, about 50 renminbi per ton. But European, I noticed you have got 90, almost 100 euro per ton, right? If that is in China, it's very, very competitive using the hydrogen, green hydrogen for steel companies, steel industry, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add to this because it's very important and stick with this point. I share one slide again that I jumped over before. So the bottom line of this, it's totally supporting what you just said, Max, and also Kan Li, and that is that that steel can be an early competitive market already in 2030, and it's a bit of a complex slide, but what you can see here, depending on the greenhouse gas intensity of your hydrogen, and this blue hydrogen from SMR, this is blue hydrogen from ATR, and this is green hydrogen with 100% renewables, and this is starting with 80 and then going to 100. Here you can see how sensitive this is. And it's also showing depending on the direct costs of hydrogen, and they come down from 100 euro per megawatt hour, which is about 3 euro per kilo of hydrogen, to about 40 here. So depending on the direct costs of hydrogen and the greenhouse gas intensity that is remaining in the hydrogen, you have the CO2 price that is required for making hydrogen-based steel here. And you see that already today, the costs are maybe at around 200 to 175 euro per ton of CO2 abatement costs or required CO2 price. But in 2030, you can cross this 150 euro line and reduce further quickly. And we are at 100 euro now, or there was a drop recently, but if that recovers, and we might even be in the EU at 200, but at least 150 in 2030. So you can see this intersection of abatement costs and carbon prices for the EU very clearly in this picture. And you also, and this is actually true for all kinds of low carbon hydrogen. And the main reason is the coke-based steel is very emission intensive. You replace a lot of emissions when you go do this step to hydrogen here.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one more comment on this? I think what Falko mentioned earlier, certification would be very important in this regard, because like you mentioned, in Europe, the carbon price is high, so that could partially compensate for the high price of hydrogen used for steel making. But in China, this would be difficult. However, if we have certification, I think we can have maybe the downstream, the consumers, to pay for this higher cost. So we had this chat between me and Professor Lee earlier, that some sort of a premium mechanism may need to be established. That's the other way of thinking about how to make hydrogen and its related products to be commercially feasible. So both kind of policies would be strongly needed, I think.
Max, it seems like you like to add something.
Thank you. Yes, excellent point, Yanfei. Actually, something that we have done, there's a lot of studies on that, looking at if we sort of have primary steel that is about 30% more expensive compared to blast furnace steel. If you look at a car, it will only influence the price of a new car of half a percentage or something. Very small numbers, actually, when you go out to the final customer. And that is also, I think, what the steel producers that are moving quickly in Europe have found out, that there is indeed a customer-driven market, mostly by businesses that want to go completely green, that actually has an appetite to buy this green steel. But of course, then we come into, now in the beginning, it's quite easy because there are only few competitors out there. So I know that Ueckerdt and other ones have no problems in selling whatever green steel they manage to produce at the moment. But in the future, we would need to have some kind of definition and certification system that would make this sort of, that would make us possible to exploit this market, because there is a willingness on an awareness with normal people and customers that actually want to buy the green steel and hopefully in future green chemicals and green cement, etc.
Thanks a lot, Max. I think that's a really excellent point. Both you and Yanfei shared. I think this is probably a very spontaneous question, but I wonder, because now we're talking about the commercialization feasibility, we're talking about scaling up the markets for green hydrogen source iron steel, which is really important. And on the other hand, we know that this is a very important infrastructure material, especially to build capacity in the global south, be it for climate adaptation or for their economic growth. So how the global south building capacity could leverage the green hydrogen development or this commercial feasibility in an optimal way? Where are the barriers and what are the potential chances, opportunities that we can make this transition even spread out to the global south, where it has a more bigger market, I think, and more potential? Maybe Max, you would like to.
May I again?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, 2 points there. One is that some of the countries in the global south, not all, do actually have a very strong competitive advantage in the longer term, that they have potentially access to very low cost solar energy. So they actually might be in a position to produce very low cost hydrogen and export to Europe, or I would then argue actually doing the sort of steel production in their own countries. I know South Africa is one of those, that there are at least some academic plans to look at it, that sort of reduced iron ore to iron directly and then exported to, for example, Germany, that has limited space and capacity to produce this large amount of electricity and hydrogen that's needed. That is one thing. Another thing I would say is, of course, capacity building. I mean, if we want to solve climate, we need to cooperate on technology development and capacity building. And I do think that that is a key aspect to keep the Paris Agreement alive, is to work more internationally with cooperation that is not just based on restricting or facilitating trade, but also on facilitating development and joint development. And I do think that the EU and other high-tech sort of regions do have a responsibility to actually help the global south. Also China, I'd also see China as a sort of high-tech region in the world.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, where as also Falko mentioned in his keynote talk, like on-site production of hydrogen, that there's a big potential there. So if in the global south, they could leverage the already very abundant solar power or other renewable power and building their capacity while generating this like green iron steel, develop their economy and create sustainable jobs. I think that will be a really good opportunity for them to decarbonize their economy, but at the same time catch up with more chances. So I guess my next question, which is I think pretty quite general and big context, but maybe I would like to hear your insights from different aspects, given your very different background. So in your opinion, how do you see like the current landscape for sustainable hydrogen development today in terms of be it technology, be it infrastructure, be it the market competitiveness, or be it the policy? Countries being adequately prepared for an energy transition that promotes particularly sustainable hydrogen like green or like other colors? And what additional progress, what are the barriers and what additional progress should we keep in mind when we're developing this sustainable hydrogen sector?
Well, I'm an economist, so maybe I can, and I study policy a lot, so maybe I can contribute a little bit here. I think the the biggest barrier now, of course, is cost, economic cost. And then this is related to technology and also infrastructure. But these are the kind of common factors people would list. I think my maybe different view is that if we emphasize the importance of energy security implication of developing this hydrogen energy, it might give governments more incentive to push for the development of this energy. As I tried to bring up this concept or idea earlier with the slide, the last one I showed, the sort of trading corridors. Because if you look at this, you can see that the sources of future hydrogen, where it comes from, could be much more diversified than oil and gas. So, and also to some extent, meeting the climate change kind of targets is also bearing implications for economic security, because I think like Europe and several other developed economies would follow, is that they're going to establish these carbon borders. So carbon border adjustment mechanism. So if you don't follow this international trend of decarbonizing your economy, the future economic security of several, in the sense of the several exporting industries might be damaged. So in this broader sense or higher level of thinking, with this kind of thinking, maybe the government can push for this harder. Why I emphasize this is because if you study the economics of industry life cycles or technology life cycles, there is always this critical death valley for new technologies and new industries. If you don't have external forces to help you get through this, it's very tough. So this idea is also related to the history, how solar and wind industries and also recently the BEV industries are sort of established. It came to today's level of development through a long period of strong government support from all around the world. Many countries spend a lot of public funds to support the development of these industries. So without this kind of mindset from both the government and the society, if you don't escalate its importance to that level, maybe the forces would be not strong enough. I think that is why some people are feeling that hydrogen development is kind of lagging behind our expectation. And some people even comment that the window is closing for hydrogen because many other competing technologies are also developing fast. So we really need to somehow figure out a way to speed it up. That's my thought. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Yanfei. Yeah, that's a really good point regarding the public opinions and also public supports for the further development of hydrogen. And yeah, we will talk about cognitive, that kind of thing in the later panel, but this is a really good point regarding how the public considers the development of hydrogen. With another pair of eyes, well, the technology itself and the sector itself is rather developed, but we consider it's kind of, oh, is that really already going to sunset? But thanks for your points. That's well taken. Ken, would you like to share your insights from more technology aspect?
I'm quite optimistic about hydrogen future, and in terms of the net zero for the climate change issues, and at the moment, people, for example, in China, people more focus on the hydrogen fuel cells in the transportation field. And if you look at the future, more broad field in industry, hydrogen is the future, is the promising source of energy and also chemicals. So And as we all just discussed about the steel industry and also some cement industry and also many other fundamental industry that need hydrogen. Only use hydrogen, you can achieve the net zero. So at the moment, technology for hydrogen production is ready. I think the only thing is the cost. Actually, the cost is not that high, and pretty much depends on the electricity and renewable electricity. And some people in PV field, they are already estimate the cost of the PV and could be as low as like 3-4 cents US dollar. So that is even much lower than the cost for hydrogen from coal. And so I think it's not a problem in the future. It's just consider about the price. And the only thing the people, I think, public customer need to accept and to understand and to realize the hydrogen is the route, almost the only route for the climate change problem. If we use we want to resolve this problem. And so, and also, of course, the market. And you need the time, need to take the time to let the market, accept the hydrogen. And so, of course, infrastructure is not ready at the moment. Even for transportation field, hydrogen station, for example, is not available in many cities. So that is a problem. So that's why the hydrogen is well behind as we expand in the market. So, but I'm very pessimistic about the hydrogen development in the future. In addition to the electrolysis process, another way will be much more cheap is the photocatalysis. You can directly get hydrogen from water using the photocatalytic process. You don't have to use the electricity and the electrolyze, and we can use the catalyst directly get hydrogen from water. That is another frontier research in this field. But at the moment, of course, the efficiency is not high enough for commercialization applications. So that's my opinion. Okay.
Thanks, Ken. Maybe Falko, Max, you would like to share thoughts on this sustainable landscape of sustainable hydrogen development in the future?
Yeah, I make it quick. So in Europe, I see an industry that is ready. So on the supply side, electrolysis, there are a couple of companies that are at the verge of serial production and building gigafactories. But also demand side, we mentioned steel specifically. And what really needs to happen now is implementing the policies that are announced. So there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty still in the EU around what is green hydrogen actually, around the implementation of carbon contracts for differences, the implementations of the quotas that are defined on the EU level, but also for Germany. So there are a couple of policies that just have to be implemented now to resolve this stalemate or this phase of waiting, if you want so, to actually have then the first substantial projects. I need to also mention IPCEI projects, so European projects or international projects of common European interests. They need to be implemented or finished also.
Thanks a lot, Falko. Max, maybe you would like to share something related to sector.
No. In that sense, I completely agree with the previous speaker that the main things are, well, I mean, it's not technology really. Of course, there are more technologies that need to be developed, but we do have enough technology to go for hydrogen at this moment, but we need, of course, infrastructure. And with everything that Falko and Li and Yanfei say, it's about ensuring creating stability and trust in the market that hydrogen will develop. And I do think that is ongoing now in certain, I would say, Europe, perhaps a little bit more, and there are niche markets like the steel that sees a direct self-interest in going here at the moment, and some other sectors that are starting to explore. I know that we have Yara in Norway that are developing ammonia to sell to other countries, green ammonia. I know that the shipping industry is interested in wind power electrolysis, hydrogen and ammonia. So there are things happening, but in order to scale up, we would need to sort of, and that's a learning process in itself, all this kind of certifications, security, actually getting customers, are they willing to buy, how much are they willing to pay for it, all of these things. And at the bottom, everything that is driving this is at the moment climate ambitions. But I think in the end, it would actually be, it will run out of itself even without climate ambitions. But at the moment, it is climate ambitions that is driving this push backed by a carbon price. But I know in 10 years' time, I don't think we will be talking about carbon prices in the same way, because it will be so obvious that this is the way we're going anyway. So uncertainty, fix the market, that it will become secure enough for investments, and also infrastructure. That's the hard part of the system that actually governments have a key role to play in planning and foreseeing where do we need infrastructure and how quick do we need it. In Europe, we always have a problem that it takes too long time because it's such a complex process of building and getting a permit for an infrastructure project.
Thanks a lot, Max. That's all points are really well taken. And I especially appreciate Max, your sharing of how ready we are and where we just need to make actions to move forward and break a few barriers, as you all mentioned, be it in technology. Well, technology now it's more ready, but be it more in market and policy and using, for instance, carbon prices as a driving force in the current context. So given that we're running towards the end of this panel, which I hope our panel could have more time, I'm going to just throw another round of question, but it's rather wrap-up question to share your insights regarding what do you feel would be the research priorities, especially from more interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary aspects to help this sector, help the sustainable hydrogen sector be scaled up and be developed in a more rapid, in a more efficient and effective way in the next, for instance, 10 years. Maybe we can start with, I don't know, Falko as the keynote.
Yeah, I think there are research questions on all fronts, but since policy instruments is so important, I would focus the social and economic science and political science on what policy instruments can ramp up the markets. And this is not a trivial question. The only point that I disagree with Max, or maybe we have to discuss in detail, is the role of carbon pricing. So I see really all these technologies need to be embedded in carbon pricing. Maybe it's more taken for granted that you go or invest into this transition, but I see really the PTX technologies, the hydrogen and derived products, as something that will remain more expensive than fossils, and therefore like everything needs to be embedded in carbon pricing. I'm saying this here because carbon pricing is not everything. We have lead markets, but we also need technology support, infrastructure policies. And this is, as I said, it's a new challenge to ramp up infrastructure demand and supply at the same time. Never has been like this before. And now the question is, how do you finance that? Who is willing to pay the learning curve? How do you distribute risks between the state and private investors in this new potentially high, but very uncertain field of hydrogen. So maybe I leave it with this. So really the focus is on getting the policies right. And here, even though we have some first pillars that are implemented now, the research questions remain of how to complementing carbon prices with technology policies also for the next 1 or 2 decades.
Great point. That's why we're here today with this cross panel talking. Max, maybe you would like to make some comments there, continuing this.
Oh yes, I'd love to. No, I do like carbon pricing a lot, and yes, it is the fundamental driving force. But we need to remain humble and to understand that carbon pricing assumes normally sort of flexible free market. All economies are not governed that way. Some are more state-controlled, and we also fix and rig the markets in different ways. So we could call it carbon pricing, we could call it a push to make the fossils pay for actually the problems they cause. And that could be for pricing, could be for limiting access, could be simply from banning them, which is also now being up in climate policy to actually, have a non-proliferation treaty for fossil fuels. It's a long way to go, but that was just the main point, that if you sort of think away fossils, where do you go? Where sort of how do you start thinking then in a long term what is possible? And then I agree with you, Falko, that yes, power to X, it's a huge cost difference from taking it directly from the fossil fuel source. And that would require either just simply a ban of fossil feedstock or a very high carbon price, very, very high. And the question is whether we would accept that. I don't know. Somehow we would, but maybe not as a general carbon price across the whole economy. But regardless of that, I do think we agree, but I would argue should talk about carbon pricing with a bit of sense that will look different in different countries, political traditions, ways of implementing climate policy, and so on. The one key thing, if I would focus on one policy measure I would then focus on green hydrogen, because I do believe it has the greatest potential, and that would to make it possible, as much possible as possible, a lot of possibles there, to actually produce green hydrogen directly from renewable energy at the cost that can be produced at in certain regions. Then we can see solar sort of green hydrogen produced with energy costs down to below 20 euros per megawatt hour even. I mean, the standard industrial price for electricity in Swedish heavy industry is 30 euros per megawatt hour. It's quite different from Germany. But that we're seeing in India, we're seeing in all other countries, there's a huge potential, but sometimes policy is in the way for traditional, historically good reasons, cross subsidies, whatever. But now we need maybe to look at it. Can we produce the hydrogen cheaply directly from power purchase agreements or something similar to integrate renewable electricity production with hydrogen production? Then we can get the green hydrogen cost really, really down low where it needs to be in order to be competitive. So look at the electricity market or the kind of ways how we can organize that.
Thanks a lot, Max. That's an excellent point. And Ken, please go ahead with your final thought. Ken, I think you have to unmute yourself first.
Okay, I just opened. Okay, sorry. And I would, for the last time of my talk, I would like to emphasize again, green hydrogen is the future of the human being. And not only for energy field, but also for almost every industry, aspect of every industry. So here I want to emphasize or encourage more people, younger people, and to be involved in this field, and not only the importance of the technology we are talking, but also the scientific research. And hydrogen actually, bring up many interesting issues, academic issues, and so that's we'll need more people, young people, to devote into this field and to develop some emerging novel technology, which will dramatically change this field. And we are talking about cost and infrastructure and so all the issues about. But these issues may be easily, resolved if you have a new technology appeared. So that need more people, young people, some graduate students and PhD students that come to join this field and to make their contribution and new discovery and in theory and also in practice. I think this field is very, very important. We need to, encourage more people to join this field and to put forward this field. Okay, that's my last point. Okay.
Thanks, Cam. Very well taken. Maybe Yanfei, you would like to quickly share your final thoughts?
Thanks. Having said all the previous things about the necessity of developing hydrogen, and also hearing all the speakers about how to promote hydrogen development, I still feel that there are some gaps there regarding our targets or vision about hydrogen is there, but how to get there is still uncertain. Like Falko mentioned, the regulatory uncertainty, and Max mentioned these carbon pricing issues. So different countries have different situations. So they will come up with different mechanisms or measures or policies to get there. So this is something that really we need to study more. And the other thing that I think we need to study more is to better comprehend what this transition would imply from many different dimensions other than just economic. For example, this morning in a different panel, I raised this question regarding what would be the impact of the transition from fossil to hydrogen on the demand for the so-called green metals, because that's basically about material, the need for material. So when we are transiting from like conventional fossil fuel vehicle to BEVs, we are now having this concern about how we can meet the material need for this kind of transition. So similarly, how hydrogen would bear these kind of implications is still something that we need to study in detail and in different countries' context. So that I think in this regard, a lot of things to be done. And as you mentioned, this would require efforts from the collaboration of different experts from different disciplines. So I think this kind of a joint effort and by different sectors would be strongly needed to better comprehend what this means and then how to get there.
Thanks a lot, Yanfei, and thank you all. This is excellent time management. We're almost there. And apparently, from this discussion, we know that sustainable hydrogen is so important, and we need them to be scaled up in a very timely and also effective manner. Well, challenging, but also very exciting with loads of opportunities, as we discussed today. And thank you all, Falko, Max, Ken, and Yanfei, for joining us today and sharing your insights to enable us to have this very aspirational panel discussion and also inspiring a lot of future research, I believe, be it carbon pricing, be it infrastructure, be it technology, etc. And thank you all also to all the audience for your staying here and our great team behind. And I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to my colleague, Dr. Christina Word, sorry for my pronunciation, who actually organized this panel. And just because my time zone is more friendly, so I'm appear here, but she is really the hero. Thank you all, and hope everybody taking care, and hopefully we can see each other and have more collaborations in the future. Goodbye, and see you tomorrow.
It's been a pleasure, and see you. Bye.
Bye. See you. Okay. See you all. Okay. Goodbye.